All right, Magic Makers. We had a little bit of a technical glitch, but we all have been on Zoom, so we know how that all works out. So Ashley and I were just talking about how our body is just so adaptable, and that's just really interesting. The one thing that for those of you who are interested in learning more about cholesterol, she's done a really good job of breaking down all of the varying pieces to really help us get a better handle on cholesterol. But before I go there, I know that one of the questions are, my doctor told me if I don't get my cholesterol under whatever the number is, I need to go on some type of medication. Now, what are your thoughts on the medication? Is there a good way to, with everything you've given us, a way to get our numbers down naturally before, going on some type of prescribed medication?
Well, first, I guess I'll preface by saying that if your doctor's prescribing that medicine, it's because they want to keep you alive. Um, it's not your doctor is not bad for suggesting that. We can have a larger conversation about the medical system in the United States, but statins do exactly what they're supposed to. They can lower your cholesterol levels by 40%, and they can reduce your risk of having heart disease, or developing heart disease and having some sort of incident like a heart attack or a stroke. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to immediately go on those for everyone. For some people, of course, it's going to be a situation where your doctor might want you to start on those immediately to really be able to reduce that impact if your situation is serious enough. However, I would say most people probably could dabble in some of these lifestyle changes, like really improving their intake of fiber, that soluble fiber in particular, looking at that saturated fat intake, and being honest with themselves about the level that they do exercise.
Mm.
All three of those components, and certainly not just for your podcast, but the entire population. Again, 8% of Americans are eating enough fiber. So of course, this is something that happens to 1 in 3 adults, let's say. Um, so I would say like encouraging that could be a great first pass. But again, doctors don't necessarily have that nutrition background to be able to give the specifics, pointed feedback to collect dietary information and be able to give back, actionable insights on what someone could tweak or could add to their diet. Um, and one thing I'll say about statins is if someone is taking a statin, I hate that the world has, for some reason, made that seem like a failure.
Mm.
We have so many medical conditions with absolutely zero pharmaceutical intervention. Like, we are very fortunate to have this medication that does exactly what we want it to. Because there's so many people out there that would love if they had something like that for whatever they're dealing with. So again, it does not mean that you're a failure. It means that thank goodness we have this medication that can help bring that level down, especially if it's something that you haven't been able to bring down with lifestyle changes.
Now, as you mentioned, so, is there a way for you to potentially, so you take the statin, you're on the statin, is there a way for you to potentially come off the statin, or is a statin kind of like a forever drug?
I would say it's a forever drug. I would say that doctors are probably more hesitant to
Mm.
bring someone off of it just because I would say most patients probably have a really tough time transitioning off of it and maintaining those lower levels just through lifestyle change.
Mm.
Um, it's definitely a case by case basis, but I understand skepticism from some doctors of this works for like 1 out of 20 patients. Do we really need to try it? But again, that's just kind of going back to not having that concrete dietary recommendations that you can implement that could have that big impact. Um, Usually, you 100% need to do this with your doctor, not usually. You should be in communication with your doctor, get their buy in if you want to try it.
Mm.
Stopping statins cold turkey is not good. So if you're on a high dose and your doctor maybe wants to bring that down for you to try, that's a great first way. But you shouldn't necessarily just completely stop taking it and not tell anyone about it. That can be really dangerous.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but I've absolutely worked with a lot of people that were got a high level, got a high cholesterol reading, and then at the same time that they started that medication, started making these lifestyle changes, Their levels came down a lot, and with their doctor's blessing, basically, they worked their way off of that statin and could maintain it with just dietary changes.
Gotcha.
On the flip side, people that are on high doses of some type of statin, but they still can't get their levels down to where their doctor would really like um, them starting to implement these lifestyle changes can help to get them that last 10, 15%, 20% down into those normal ranges, even with the help of medicine. So it's not necessarily a black or white, I'm on it or I'm off. There's lots
Mm.
of kind of steps in between. But again, I'll just echo 100%. Work with your doctor on it. Of course, ultimately it's your decision, but it's nice to have someone monitoring your health when you are taking something like a statin.
Now, on the flip side, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't like, you know, a lot of my people are like, I don't want to take pharmaceuticals. Now, are there any supplements that can help support uh lowering your cholesterol?
I think the best one is a fiber supplement if
Mm-hmm.
you have a hard time getting to those 25 to 30 grams for women. Um, the other ones that can be helpful, plant sterols and stanols.
Mm-hmm.
These are basically plant compounds that look very chemically similar to cholesterol. So when we eat these plant sterols, a supplement that has plant sterols before we have a meal that has dietary cholesterol, so it has to come from an animal.
Mm-hmm.
It can basically block the amount of that dietary cholesterol that we absorb. Now, we already talked about dietary cholesterol not being the most impactful. So if you're just taking a plant sterol and you're not changing your fiber intake or looking at saturated fat, it probably won't have the hugest impact, but it can definitely impact that 10% of dietary cholesterol that we absorb. Um, the other one that is really, really common is fish oil supplements.
Mm.
They can be helpful for people that have very high levels of triglycerides, over 150, over 200. But fish oil supplements, even though they can put that cute little heart on the bottle that says can improve heart health, do not lower your LDL. In fact, they could increase LDL by 10%. There really is no movement on HDL. So unless you have very high triglycerides and you know maybe you're thinking you can move your LDL with focusing on fiber and saturated fat, we all don't need to be taking a fish oil supplement, especially if you're taking it specifically for your heart health. And then the other one that comes up all the time that I do not recommend is red yeast rice. This is
Yeah,
super
yeah.
common. It is, you know, one thing about supplements is just because they are quote unquote natural, which none of them are natural, they all have been derived from some compound and put into a pill, which is not how we find them in nature. Um, is that for some reason, you know, the logic behind it's a supplement, so it's better for me, or there's no side effects, or it's better than a pharmaceutical is just not true.
Mm.
And red yeast rice, I think, is a really good example of that. Basically, red yeast rice is exactly the same as a statin. It
Gotcha.
does the exact same thing in the body. The downside of that is that if someone's taking red yeast rice, they're not doing it under a doctor's care. So
Uh,
those side effects, which can happen to, you know, about 2% of people taking statins, you have no one kind of to report that to. So if you're on a statin, your doctor is going to be testing your liver function labs to make sure that your liver health is okay. If you just decide to buy that off of Amazon, you might not be having someone specifically looking at those. You know, another side effects that a small percentage of people might experience on statins is muscle pain.
mm.
If you're not having that conversation with someone that can pinpoint you taking this specific supplement as a cause for that muscle pain, you might not know that that's the thing that you should drop. It does the same thing as a statin. It has the same potential side effects, but you're not doing it under a doctor's care. And most importantly, supplements aren't regulated. So they could, you know, supplement companies can put whatever they want into a supplement. That means there might be extra stuff in there. The dosage could be too high or too low. So with a statin, you know the exact dose that you're getting. You're getting 5 milligram of, you know, enter whatever statin. In red yeast rice, you might be getting 4 times that, but nobody's responsible for checking that.
Right.
So it's not worth the risk. If you feel comfortable taking red yeast rice, you should feel even more comfortable taking a statin because it's the same thing, but it's regulated. You're actually going to take what you think you're taking.
Right. And there was another supplement that someone told me about. Was it bergamot, I think?
Yep, that one is out there. Bergamot, berberine are things that are out there. Yeah, truthfully, again, my thinking is if you want to make a change to your lifestyle, really focus on changing your diet and maybe
Mm,
exercise. If you're comfortable with taking berberine or bergamot every single day, which is what you're going to have to do in order for that supplement to give you long-term results. If you're comfortable taking that one, why aren't you comfortable taking the statin that's going to give you much better results? Bergamot maybe can decrease LDL by 5%. Statin's going to be up to 40%. You're still taking it every day.
true.
um and there's no again, that like thought process that it's natural, so nothing, it doesn't, I don't know, like it's the same as drinking water, is not true.
I think for many people that it's, the whole big pharma is out to get me kind of thing versus taking a supplement isn't, is better for me than to just actually take the pharmaceutical drug.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think that we overprescribe in this country. We should have a like period of at least 6 months where people could try lifestyle interventions.
Mm-hmm.
For most people, it's not like a life and death. If you don't start taking this tomorrow, you're going to have a heart attack. If that were the case, they'd put you in for surgery.
Right, exactly.
Um, heart disease is a slow building disease. It's got a slow burn. Everybody starts developing these atherosclerotic plaques basically the second that we are born. They slowly develop, and for some people, it develops at a much more accelerated rate. But ask your doctor, like, I want to try this for 3 to 6 months. But I think the reason why that fails is because you want to try it, but there's no strong evidence-based kind of like pathway or plan. And a lot of people, they would go low carb, or they would go on keto, or they would try carnivore, and then they go back to the doctor, and not only maybe has their level not moved, but it's gotten a lot worse.
Right.
And again, that's exactly why I created my program, because I get that frustration and that fear of there's nothing that works for me. This is my only option. Or I've tried everything and it doesn't seem to budge. And again, it's just because there's so much noise out there, but there wasn't like a clear path to this is exactly what you should do.
Perfect. So which leads me to, you have a course. So if I'm someone who's like, yeah, I really want to get serious about getting this cholesterol level down, what can I learn in your course?
Yeah. So how I set up the course is, working with people for, I think I had been working with clients for 10 years before I made the course. And it really implements everything that I would have done in a one-on-one setting, except you can pause, rewind, rewatch, revisit as often as you want. You'll always have access to that course. How I laid it out first, and this is what I find, I'm also a nutrition instructor at the university level. So this is what I found education wise tends to be the most helpful in education in general, but also working with clients on their health goals or nutrition. The first thing that we talk about is really going in depth into what your cholesterol is. We've touched on that in part one. Why your body makes it, where it comes from, the things that you might be doing that are increasing or decreasing. And then with that knowledge, phase two of the course is going through specific types of food groups. So I think there's 20 lessons in phase two. They're all like 2 to 6 minutes. But we specifically talk about dairy. What aspects of dairy might be causing increased levels of cholesterol? What's the best type of dairy you should be incorporating? Or when we get into fruits and vegetables, like what are those fruits and vegetables that happen to be really good source of soluble fiber, but also
Mhm.
ones that are great sources of antioxidants that can help to reduce that inflammation that can cause those plaques. And then the third section is great. We know why it's important. I know exactly what to do, but like, how do I do it?
Yeah,
So
the
phase three goes
implementation.
goes into this is why you should only pick to focus on one or two things for the first week instead of trying to change 95 things, getting burnt out in 4 weeks, and
Yeah,
then your cholesterol doesn't move, because
right.
having a small improvement in cholesterol over time that you can maintain is always going to be more beneficial for your health than a big decrease that lasts for 3 months and then it goes right back up. In that phase three, we talk about meal planning. We talk about dealing with different preferences in your household, because there's absolutely nothing worse than cooking and sitting down and half the table grumbling about what you've served them. So how you work when other people, or how you can plan when other people aren't necessarily working on lowering their cholesterol as well.
Yeah.
Because dang, does a grouchy husband ruin everything?
I know. It's funny. Everyone's like, oh, does your husband eat the way you do? And I was like, I'm not McDonald's. Like, there's one meal.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but I love that because I feel like so many people think in order to be, I'm like using air quotes here for those of you guys who are listening, to be healthy, I have to eat differently than my family. And
Yeah.
and if anything, even for your children, or even for people who don't have high cholesterol, no one ever got fat eating too many fruits and vegetables. So it's going to be a good thing for them to make sure, explore this as well, so that hopefully they don't get that same number when they get their blood work done.
Yeah, exactly. And, family history is something that so many people attribute their cholesterol to. And while some instant, it might be true, but about 10% of people with high cholesterol have this inherited condition called familial hypercholesterolemia. And there's
Hmm.
nothing they can do about it. And again, for those people, thank goodness we have statins, because that is the only option for really being able to bring those levels down. That's 10% of all of the people with high cholesterol, which is like 90 million adults in the United States. Certainly, you can have other factors in your genetics, like for example, you're much more sensitive to saturated fats.
Mm.
Um, but if that is true, you have siblings or your parents also had high cholesterol. The first thing I always like to say is you inherit a lot more than just your genes. You also inherit your eating habits, like the foods you think are normal that you celebrate with, the foods that have never been on your plate. Most likely it's because you didn't learn to eat those growing up. So for feeding a family, especially if your entire family tends to have high cholesterol levels, teach your kids right now that it's normal to put beans on their plate, so that they don't have to learn that when they're in their late 30s or 40s and get that high cholesterol level too.
Yeah.
There's no downside in showing your kids, what a heart healthy diet, for example, looks like now. That doesn't mean that your kids can't enjoy all the fun kid foods, or that you can't enjoy those. But using the same components, but maybe on your plate, modifying a little bit. I wish I was still playing high school soccer and could eat the 2 hot dogs and milkshake before I would go home and eat dinner.
Right.
I
Oh my
don't quite
God.
need that anymore. But like maybe I could still have, one hot dog and put a salad on my plate, so my kid doesn't see that like mom has to eat completely different from me, especially for daughters.
Yeah.
I do feel like that is just a constant thing in the back of your mind, that in order to maintain a certain type of body, you can't eat normal food. And that can lead us into a whole diet culture conversation. But I definitely think that can influence kids too.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love all this, because you're right. Like if you do have a family history of high cholesterol, it doesn't just show up, right? Like over time, your levels have been high at a point, even in your 20s, that your doctor's like, what's going on here? It
Hmm.
just doesn't, but just pop up in your 40s. But for many, like you described, in your 40s, it pops up because we're not moving as much. We're losing muscle mass. We haven't really adapted our eating habits to
Hmm.
our more sedentary life. Maybe we still are having those 2 hot dogs and a milkshake, and
Sure.
we're not, and it's like, hey, you only play flag football once a month, so you really can't do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I love that, and how you've taken the varying foods in your course and made it so that, one, it's bite size. Like don't tell me something in 90 minutes, because I'm just snooze a palooza. But it's like short, bite size bits. You're like, okay, here are the fruits and vegetables. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about antioxidants, so that I can easily pick one thing and I'm like, all right, I'm going to work on that. Now let's go here. Now let's go here. So that it's not this whole like, here's your world. You decide where you're going to start.
Yeah. My approach, and definitely what we've talked about, I haven't said on this podcast at all, you need to completely avoid this food or always include this one.
Yeah.
The course is focused on those nutrients, which means that everyone can eat a different style, like a different pattern. Everyone's household is different. The
Mm,
preferences of people in their household is different. Their time constraints are different. And this, I don't teach a always in or always out, like eat this, don't eat this, black or white list, because it doesn't work.
mm-mm.
But when you're focusing on those nutrients, it can be different for everyone. So, for example, half and half in your coffee. is something that can contribute a relatively small amount of saturated fat, depending on how many cups you're eating or how much half and half or how many cups you're drinking, how much half and half you like in your coffee. But let's say for one person that had a serving of half and half in every morning coffee, that gives you about the saturated fat of a hamburger each week. And, if you're thinking about lowering your cholesterol, like cutting out my once weekly hamburger might seem like a really easy, like, of course, that's something I would do, but I'm not going to think about that half and half. And when it's nice when you're thinking about nutrients, people are like, I would rather die than take half and half out of my coffee. So I'm going to get rid of the hamburger, which your body doesn't care. It doesn't care where it comes from.
Exactly.
For me, I'd rather put a splash of soy milk and keep the hamburger. So it gives you a lot more freedom and flexibility when you're thinking about nutrients as opposed to yes or no. You feel much less restricted. And I think that's why so many people have been successful, because when you're traveling, you don't have your perfectly curated stuff, but you can still find
Right.
those options that give you enough fiber and keep that saturated fat level in check.
Yeah, no, and you're right. I love the flexibility, because I know me personally, I am a diet rebel. So the moment you tell me, this is your window, I'm like, how do I break out as quickly as I possibly can? How do I bend
Yeah.
these rules? And so when you've given me like this kind of like, here is your world, and I can have, anything in this world, I'm like, okay, I got a lot of variety here, that I don't feel like so hemmed in.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the goal. Everyone thinks that they want a strict meal plan, but no one wants a strict meal plan,
No.
because like your meal plan is not always going to be there. You're not going to be able to follow it. And like, what happens when the meal plan ends? So the goal, I always say I would be a really shitty dietitian if all I did was teach you how to follow a meal plan. Like, I should be putting myself out of business. I want you to learn these skills to go and do it without me.
Mm.
So changing that mindset of I just want someone, to tell me exactly what to eat, that definitely takes some work. I think it's just all this noise that we have out there of people feeling as if they can't be the expert in themselves. There's too much confusion. Like it is hard. It's a full-time job to try and manage and navigate. Like, okay, I can eat a banana in this instance, but I can't in this instance. Like, there's just too much stuff out there that's confusing.
Yeah.
But like, again, you are the only person that knows exactly what's going to work in your household, exactly how your preferences are going to make you feel either restricted or not restricted. So I want to empower people to get this knowledge and then take it and run with it. You don't need someone telling you exactly what to do. You need someone maybe helping to build that foundation, but you can 100% make those best decisions on your own.
Gotcha. This has been such a great conversation. We hit all the things that I really wanted to make sure that we covered. And Magic Bakers, if you are not following her on social media, please make sure you do. Ashley, where can they follow you on social media?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I am lower.cholesterol.nutrition. If you're on TikTok, I'm lower.cholesterol. And then my website is just ashleyreaver.com. And I post a lot in my stories on Instagram, just real life food. That's not perfect, but it is things you can randomly throw together that work. I always like to say, don't let perfect be the enemy of best. And 80% is fine. Don't need to be 100% if it stresses you out and makes you drop off the face of the earth working on some of these health goals.
Exactly. So now the question I have for you, I ask every person who comes on the show, what's one thing that makes you feel magical?
Ooh. I mean, of course, I love getting client success stories.
Mm.
Um, when someone tells me they dropped their cholesterol by 80 points.
Oh, wow.
But probably my son. I have a 20-month-old. He'll be
Oh,
2 in September,
oh my
and
gosh.
he's great. I didn't know that I was destined to go to baby gymnastics and baby music class, but I'm glad we got there. That I found my passion for baby gymnastics in my 30s.
It's funny. You're probably like the fifth or sixth person I've talked to that is like a new or new-ish mom, and they're just like, I thought I would like want a baby, but like all of a sudden you're like, holy crap, this baby came into my life and just like grabbed me. Like it just
Yeah,
like all the things that I thought I would never do as a mom, I'm like, here I am, I'm
yeah.
doing them.
And my husband's always like, I'm, of course, as most moms are, I feel like I'm juggling too much. I'm never perfect at work. I'm never perfect at home. I'm never perfect as a mom. My husband's like, why don't you put him in daycare an extra day? I'm like, absolutely not. I'm going to gymnastics on Fridays.
Right.
But yeah, it's funny. I didn't know I needed such a block of time in my schedule. I could have just been being a creeper and I guess watching little kids in gymnastics all this time, and I would have felt magical the whole time.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of here. And, Magic Makers, what she gave here isn't rocket science. And the last thing she said when she talked about her course, the last thing she said is, I teach you how to implement. And so many of you probably took as much notes as I did. And are you going to take action? All right. And if you're not someone who's can take action without someone like looking over your shoulder, that's why you have an Ashley. So check her out, look at her stories, check out her course, because if you're looking to really lower your cholesterol and you don't want to go into statins or roll the dice with a supplement, she's giving you some pretty straightforward things. And they're most foods that either we should be eating or you're probably eating already and just not eating enough.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Thank you so much, Ashley. And I thank you for putting up with our technology difficulties. And we'll let you know when all of this comes out. All right, Magic
Awesome.
Makers, enjoy the rest of your day and make sure you follow Ashley on social to understand everything about cholesterol moving forward.